Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which focuses on covering what you need to know regarding the 2013 VAWA amendments to the Jeanne Clery Act. Presenting today from the Clery Center will be Allison Kiss, our Executive Director, and Abigail Boyer, Assistant Executive Director of Programs, Outreach, and Communications. I'm Amy Guthrie, and I will be acting as the moderator for today's session. I will be monitoring any questions and providing technical assistance as needed. I'd also like to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, we encourage you to type them into the questions pane in the GoToWebinar control panel. We will be providing answers to the questions throughout the session as we can get to them, and we'll also have an added Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you're having any technical difficulties or cannot hear the presentation at any time, please feel free to click the hand icon that's on the side toolbar at the top left of the control panel, and I will assist you as best as I can. We will also provide a link to the recording of the webinar this afternoon via email. And now I'd like to open it up to Abby and Allie to get started. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy. This is Allison Kiss. I'm the Executive Director of the Clery Center. I have been with the organization for 8 years. In 2005, I left the organization for a couple of years and then returned in 2011 in the Executive Director role. And I'm really pleased to co-present with Abigail Boyer. Both of us come from an advocacy background. So we both started our careers in a community crisis counseling type of situation and prevention education. We're really pleased to partner with the Campus Technical Assistance and Research Project, or the Campus TA program, with the Office on Violence Against Women, Department of Justice, who this is brought to you on behalf of. We work with them on Clery technical assistance with the campus program grantees, and some of the campus program grantees are on this webinar. We've also made this webinar basically available to anyone in a campus environment. So if you're not a campus program grantee and you have questions about the campus program, you can certainly find that information on OVW's website. We do have close to 500 folks registered for this webinar. So if for some reason we do not get to your question, or you have something specific you need information on, our contact information will be provided at the end as well. And we'll make a point to collect those questions throughout. A little bit about the Clery Center. So the Clery Center was founded in 1987 by Howard and Connie Clery. We are an organization that works on several pillars, and on the next slide you'll see some what those are: policy, training, education, and advocacy. So we do a lot of work with advocacy, victim advocacy, training and technical assistance to colleges and universities. We do peer education programs, Clery Act training, and then we also do Title IX training. On our next slide, the presentation agenda for today. And Amy, are the slides forwarding?
No, they aren't. You know what?
Excuse us as we have some technical difficulty.
Yep. Abby, have you granted Allie your screen control to your screen?
Let me.
Okay.
Is it moving now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Apologize for that.
No problem. And if we can go to the next slide now. Great. So our agenda today, thank you, and we apologize to the attendees, but hopefully that will be our only glitch. Our update for today is, our agenda for today is to talk about the Clery Act updates, so the VAWA amendments to Clery, which many people refer to as the Campus Save Act, since that was formally how it was first presented to Congress when the idea for the law, when they came up with the idea for the law. It's formally known as the VAWA amendments to the Clery Act because that is in fact what was passed. We're going to talk about common mistakes in Clery implementation, and then collaboration for compliance. So some tools to help you collaborate for compliance with Clery, compliance with the VAWA amendments to Clery, and since many of those do intersect with Title IX, how you can work with multiple departments on your campus for compliance. The next slide looks at Jeanne Clery Act requirements, and we're really going to go over this briefly just to give some of you on the line who may not have as much background in Clery an overall look of what Clery is. For the most part, people primarily think of Clery as counting or statistics. And while that is a part of it, the campus crime statistics, there's also a piece that talks about statements of policy. So your annual security report, which is required by Clery, it's due October 1st of every year. It needs to include the campus crime statistics for the preceding 3 years, and then statements of policies, which are basically cliff notes of full policies. So they have to be shortened versions of complete policies that talk about sex offenses, emergency response, timely warning. It also includes the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights, which affords certain rights to victims of sexual violence and sexual assault, ongoing disclosures for emergency notification, timely warning, and then a public crime log that keeps track or lists crimes that are reported to police and security. And the United States Department of Education enforces the Clery Act, and for a violation, it is a $35,000 fine per violation, and that number just increased last year. A little more about the law for those of you who may want more information. It was originally passed in 1990 as part of the Student Right to Know and Campus Security Act. The amendments it was amended in 92, 98, 2008, and now most recently in 2013. The codification is 20 U.S. Code 1092. Regulations appear, and we have where all of that information is. The most recent rules were published on October 29th, 2009. So that was after the 2008 amendments. And this is a good point to bring up negotiated rulemaking. What they mean by the final rules is that the Department of Education will have negotiated rulemaking. And in that session, there are negotiators who are nominated to the committee. And the negotiators talk about each of the provisions that we'll go over a little bit today, but we'll iron out some of the details there. And then we'll get the information on what those details are when negotiated rulemaking ends, which this year it will end on April 1st of 2014. So shortly after that, the final rules will be published, and we'll know some of the concrete pieces of SAVE or the VAWA amendments. So it's important to know as we go through this, some of this is what was passed in the law, but again, we have to wait for the rulemaking to get the ironed out details. So one caution I would give you is while you're looking at your policies and starting to work on implementation, just to keep in mind that you do want to wait for the final rules to come out. And before you really go to either contract with someone, hire someone, or purchase anything specific to Campus Save, you want to make sure that the final law is in place or the final rules are out. I mentioned that what this will do is primarily with Clery, this is the first major expansion to the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights since that amendment occurred in 1992. So it's the first time that Clery has really been expanded specific to the victims' rights piece. The sex offense policy and Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights, these are the components that you should already have in your policy and in your annual security report. This should be part of your policy. And we have the R with the circle around it. That's our cliff note for required. This is required. You are required to have educational programs to prevent sex offenses on your campus. You are required to have procedures to follow when a sex offense occurs. And those procedures include the option to notify law enforcement. So you have to have in your policy that there is an option to notify local law enforcement, and that you will help your students with that option. Notification of on and off campus services is another component. And then changes in academic or living situation, if reasonable. Campus disciplinary procedures, and then sanctions to follow after a final determination. The updates, the Campus Save Act, we're going to talk a little bit about the history, and now known as the VAWA amendments to Clery. We'll also talk about some of the preliminary guidance that was issued by the Department of Education, and we have that on Department of Education letterhead. If that is something you are interested in receiving, you can certainly reach out to us. I also think it's available on our website, but we'll summarize what that preliminary guidance is. And then we'll talk about the elements of the law as it was signed on March 7th before negotiated rulemaking. So Campus Save is known as Section 304 of VAWA. So the VAWA amendments to Clery, it's Section 304 if you want to read the actual statutory language. It was signed into law on March 7th, 2013, and it covers students and staff of institutions, which is pretty dramatic for Clery because it's expanding to cover staff as well. And again, it's a dramatic expansion to sexual violence reporting and policy, and probably the most dramatic since 1992, which again was the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights. For crime statistics with SAVE, well, excuse me, I'm going to go back to the U.S. Department of Education preliminary guidance. So the negotiated rulemaking, which we already talked about, is starting. That process starts in January. It starts on January 13th. The Clery Center will have a representative on that panel. So I also encourage you, if you have anything specific that you think should possibly be brought up, or you would like to dialogue about anything in the law, please reach out to Abby or I. We're happy to hear what your concerns are, since we're certainly sitting on rulemaking to represent both advocates and campus administration. Final regulations will come out after the rulemaking process. And what the Department of Education has said is in next year's ASR, so the October 2014 ASR, is to make a good faith effort to include statistics for 3 preceding calendar years. So here it's asking you to put out this information or have this information ready before the law is actually implemented. So really what I would tell you to do is take it as it says it, to make that good faith effort, do the best you can. And that's come directly from the Department of Education to start to get these policies and procedures in place. And again, until the rules come out, you're not necessarily sure what that may look like. So we're going to go through some of the elements of Section 304. Probably the most notable thing that SAVE does is it is going to expand definitions to include, or statistic collection to include, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. So beyond sexual violence, you're also going to include these 3 crimes. The definitions that were included in Campus Save come from the Violence Against Women Act. So they're the definitions that many of you who are in the campus program are probably already familiar with. If you're not in the campus program, you may have some familiarity with these definitions. As we understand it, these definitions are what will most likely be applied, but you also want to be aware of what your state definitions are. So know how your state definitions are similar or different from these definitions. I'm not going to read through the definitions for you, but we will go through each of them. The domestic violence is the first, and then we also have in the slides that are available to you the dating violence definition, and how that differs from domestic violence. And this certainly may be more applicable to your students on campus. And then stalking, which is the last piece. So stalking, will talk specifically about what those definitions are and what they mean.
And
the new, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say.
No, I was going to say I'm passing it to Abby, so you're up.
Wonderful. And one of the things that Allison said is that really at this point institutions should be making a good faith effort to really look at the different policies that they have on campus and how Campus Save and the VAWA amendments will really incorporate into that. And what's great is we've had a number of different phone calls, not just through the OVW program, but regularly to our organization with people saying we're looking at our policies related to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking, and we're really making this effort. We have a collaborative team on our campus, and that's really what we like to see. So for a lot of campuses, the fact that we are seeing these amendments within VAWA has really given them the opportunity to bring some individuals together that maybe hadn't been collaborating in the past and use that in order to make sure that they're in compliance with some of these new requirements. So the pieces that we're going to go through next are some of the policy statements. And here's where certainly negotiated rulemaking is going to give us a lot of information, but here's where the language that we already see included within the Violence Against Women Act really provides us with tools as to how we're going to implement some of these pieces on our campus. So the first is description of programs to prevent domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And we're going to talk about some of those program requirements in even more detail in just a moment. But I would say that this is one of the pieces that our organization is especially excited about because, as Alice had mentioned, both she and I and other people at our organization are very passionate about the programming piece. We come from an advocacy background, and we know how crucial education about these issues is. We know that if there are institutions that are really talking about sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking on their campus, a lot of times that means that that campus community is more connected to resources. They have a better understanding of what the process looks like on their campus. And it also really gives them an opportunity to recognize that on their campus, there are individuals that are there to support them throughout the process. If this should happen to them or to a friend, there are people who are there to really respond to that and to help them along the way. So we'll talk about education in just a moment. Another piece is institutional procedures followed once an incident of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking has been reported. So what that means is very similarly to what you've already been doing with the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights. You want to make sure that you have information about those procedures and what they look like. Information such as who to contact, how to preserve evidence, who to make that report. So whether it's faculty, staff, or students on your campus, you want them to know what or who the support people are on your campus, and also how they would make a report for the purposes of reporting to law enforcement, or if they want to go through the campus judicial process. And again, we really encourage you not to reinvent the wheel. So look at what you already have in place at your institutions. We've been getting a number of phone calls from people, particularly in March, right after it was passed, where they were calling us and asking us questions about the new regulations. And once we were having a discussion, they said, wow, you know what, we actually have a lot of these pieces in place. So if you are one of those institutions, we really encourage you to reach out to some of the other colleges and universities that you work with so that this is an issue that can be addressed not just within an institution, but among colleges and universities. We're all looking to make these changes. So if you already have some really wonderful programs in place, if you have practices that you think are really working and are aligned with what we're seeing within the VAWA amendments, I would encourage you to really share that among institutions. And look to what you already have in place within the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights and how some of those would extend and apply to domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to education, that is a piece that we're really excited about. And part of the reason for that is because of the type of education that it's prescribing. So the new requirement is that institutions must have primary prevention and awareness programs for all incoming students and new employees. And that's addressing institutional prohibition against domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So making sure that that campus community is aware that those crimes are unacceptable at your college or your university. Definitions under state laws, definitions of consent and what that looks like. And that's a really important conversation to be having on your campus. And a lot of colleges and universities, fortunately, are having those types of conversation, making sure that students in particular know what consent looks like. What does that mean? Options for bystander intervention. I was just at a program last night with many college students, and we were able to have some really great discussion about what are we seeing at our college or at our university, and what do we do when we have these moments where something seems off. We know that there's a behavior that's making us uncomfortable or maybe even dangerous. How do we respond when we're witnessing those moments, when it's happening to our friends, or even if it's something that's happening to us? How do we know what to do, and how do we give tools that really seem accessible? How do I, as an institution, how are we sharing information so that if students or faculty or staff are witnessing some of these concerning behaviors, that they feel as though they have tools, that they're equipped to respond in some way? And also information on risk reduction. And this is significant because for many years, a lot of education around these issues, particularly around sexual assault, but also dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, was really focused on awareness that these crimes occur, and then also resources available on campus. And while all of those things are incredibly important and incredibly valuable, primary prevention really looks to stop victimization before it occurs. So it's looking at what are some of the attitudes around these issues that might correspond to some of this violence happening on our campus. So primary prevention incorporates things like looking at social norms that support violence, looking at attitudes that support sexual violence, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. How do gender roles factor in to the relationships that we're having on campus, consent and healthy relationships. And it also goes back to skill building. So recognizing what a healthy relationship looks like and how to have not just friendships, but romantic relationships and partnerships with other people on our campus. And so one of the things that we always say is that there are so many people out there doing really wonderful work around these issues. So this is a great time to really start connecting, if you haven't already, with some of your state and your local resources, your state coalitions, and their national resources as well. For example, when we're looking at policy development, the Stalking Resource Center had a model campus stalking policy that they are changing to really amend to some of the changes that we see within VAWA, and they are going to release another version of the model campus stalking policy that incorporates these changes. Green Dot, who's also a technical assistance provider within the campus program, does a lot of work around bystander intervention and providing students and faculty and staff, providing the campus community with tools for intervening if there are incidents that are occurring on the campus. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center has bystander intervention resources. So I really do encourage you to reach out to look at some of these resources that are available. If you have any questions, if you're looking to make some of these connections and you need help, that's what our organization is here to do as well. So look at what's available and what other colleges and universities are doing as well. Yesterday, I was on a resource panel that was with a number of different colleges at a college where a number of different providers, such as victim advocates and our organization, where they are talking about what our organizations and agencies do. And what was really great to see was that there was a county domestic violence agency, and the representative there was mentioned to me and was talking to me about how she was partnering with colleges and universities who were looking at some of these changes that they saw within or that they're seeing within VAWA, and they were really partnering to figure out, okay, well, what's implementation going to look like? How can this county victim service agency play a role in the education that's being offered on the campus? And then another agency that was there joked that their motto is, if you ask, we'll be there. So really looking to see, are these resources that are available within your community? A lot of times there are county agencies that will go out and will do programming for free. So see if this is an opportunity to have a partnership with them. And I would also consider what you're already doing, because I feel like with some of the phone calls that we've had, people have looked at education and not just the education piece, but with some of the other pieces that are being implemented, and they think that they have to make a huge shift and change everything that they're doing at this point. Whereas when we start talking to them, we recognize that there are a lot of really great programs and things that they have in place that maybe they just need to tailor it and make sure that they're covering all of the different pieces. So for example, some of you may already have a Campus Men of Strength Club, which certainly talks about bystander intervention and how we all play a role, both males and females, in changing campus culture. A lot of you may have a number of these other types of trainings that you see on your screen. So recognize that it might not mean doing a complete overhaul of what you're doing. It might just mean looking at what you're doing and figuring out what's working, what's effective, and are we taking this primary prevention approach? Are we looking at bystander intervention while we do this type of training and education? So we know that institutions are required to offer ongoing prevention and awareness campaigns for students and faculties that address these issues as well. There's also a requirement that within the annual security report, there must be that information describing the rights of victims and the institution's responsibilities regarding orders of protection, no contact orders, restraining orders, or similar lawful orders issued by a criminal, civil, or tribal court. So that means, and hopefully you know this already, your institution really needs to know what's available for students and faculty and staff. If they are in a violent relationship, what might be an option for them? For example, in Pennsylvania, we have protection from abuse orders. So it would be really important that the institutions within this particular state have an understanding of what that means, how someone would go about getting one, and what that might mean for implementation on the campus, how the campus can certainly honor that protection against abuse order if someone has it in place. There are also requirements related to disciplinary proceedings, and it mandates specific elements of the student conduct process as well as the employee conduct process in cases involving alleged domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So one of the pieces, and this is language similar to what we see within Title IX, is prompt and equitable investigation and resolution. So recognizing that when these instances occur within our campus community, our colleges and universities are required to be able to respond in a way that is prompt and equitable, and we're seeing that for both the accused and the accuser. Now, you are going to hear throughout this webinar, I'm going to use language such as accuser and accused, because that is the language that we do see within the statute. Another part that I'm particularly excited about, and I know some of my colleagues are as well, is the requirement that there must be training for officials who are hearing cases relating to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, so that they can conduct an investigation that protects the safety of victims and promotes accountability. And that's significant because we know that a lot of times when we are working with these cases, there may be survivors that have counterintuitive response. So for example, you may be talking to a survivor and they may not be crying or seem visibly upset. For example, if as a victim advocate, when I worked for a county agency, I might go to a hospital for a sexual assault forensic exam, and when I walk into the room and meet with that person, they might be crying and upset. They might want to talk about what just happened. They may not want to talk about what just happened. They may want to talk about something completely different. And all of those responses, whether it's upset or scared or even seemingly non-emotional, were completely normal response. So recognizing that after an offense occurs, everyone processes information differently, everyone responds differently. So it's important that individuals who are hearing cases recognize that. So if they have someone who, as they're going through the process, is laughing, that they recognize that sometimes people will laugh because they're uncomfortable, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a reflection of the validity of the case or whether or not the incident happened. It's critically important that these individuals have trainings on the responses of victims, because only by having that training can they really be able to provide that prompt and equitable investigation and response. The accuser and the accused are also both entitled to the same opportunity to have others present, and both shall be simultaneously informed in writing of the outcome of any disciplinary proceeding, the institution's procedures for the accused and the victim to appeal the results of that proceeding, any change in the results before they become final, and when the results become final. And again, this is important because the results of that particular hearing are going to impact that person's safety and that person's well-being. So for example, say there's an incident where the accused is suspended, and then later on, he or she is allowed back onto the campus. It is critically important that the survivor in that particular case knows that this change has occurred, because if he or she walks onto campus for the first day of class and runs into that person, not thinking that they were going to be allowed to be in that environment any longer, we know that that could certainly be traumatic for that person. So giving them information throughout the process and keeping them informed certainly will help to make sure that their safety and their well-being is taken care of. There's also the requirement that a student or employee that reports to the institution that one of these offenses has occurred must be provided with a written explanation of the rights and options for victims. And this relates to what I was just talking about a bit ago, in that people respond very differently. And we know that after a trauma, it can be very difficult to process all of the different options, all of the different information that's being provided. So this really provides colleges and universities with the option to create a guide, to create information that is accessible. Because you might sit down with a person and go through, here are all of your different resources, here are all the different people on your campus who can respond, here's your option for changing academic and living situation. You might go through all of this information in detail, but that said, that person could very easily leave that conversation and say, I don't know what I want to do next. I can't remember all of these different pieces. There's so many different things to choose from. And we want to make sure that they have the time to really be able to process that and come up with the response that's best for them, because none of us can make that determination. Only that person can know what's best for them. So giving this to them in writing really provides them not only the information, but it gives them something tangible to take away so that they can process it on their own time and figure out what is best for them moving forward. The other point that we wanted to make is that there is certainly an intersection, even prior to the reauthorization of VAWA, between the Clery Act and Title IX. So many of you are familiar that Title IX is a federal civil rights law that prevents discrimination on the basis of sex. And what we know from the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights is that that extends to sexual harassment and sexual violence. So Title IX requires an institution to take action once they know or should reasonably know of a possible sexual harassment or sexual violence that creates a hostile environment. So that institution must take immediate and appropriate steps to eliminate the sexual harassment or sexual violence, prevent its recurrence, investigate to determine what happened, and take appropriate steps to resolve the situation. So between the Clery Act and Title IX, we see intersections, and some of those places where there's overlap include the disclosure of policies and procedures, so having policies and procedures in place in relation, in particular with sexual violence, prompt corrective action. So under Clery and under Title IX, we know that the institution must take corrective action to work to eliminate that hostile environment. So that could be a change of academic or living situation. And with Campus Save, we saw that also extended to working and transportation. The accused and the accuser must be notified of the outcome at the same manner and in the same time frame. And with Title IX specifically, we know that both parties must be notified in writing. And also under Clery and Title IX, the institution must disclose the sanctions imposed. So under Title IX, or Title IX does require interim protective measures while that investigation is taking place. So the Clery Act and Title IX really should foster collaboration. And if this is something that hasn't been taking place on your campus, looking at the changes within the Violence Against Women Act, this is a really great opportunity to make sure that that individuals in campus police and security and others folks working with Clery compliance do have a relationship with that Title IX coordinator. We don't want to be operating in silos, because we know that it is crucial that there is a partnership with campus police, student affairs, and the Title IX coordinator. And multidisciplinary teams can really help with that. So if you aren't finding opportunities to have all of these individuals in a room to really talk about what you're seeing on the campus and to make sure that you're in compliance, not just with one law, but with all of them. So we're taking the Clery Act into consideration, we're taking Title IX into consideration, we're looking at FERPA and other federal requirements. The only way to do that is to really have that multidisciplinary collaboration.
Abby, I'm going to jump in here because there's a question that I think pairs nicely with what you just went through. One of the questions we got is, as a 2-year institution with no residence halls, will these rules require us to address these issues that are not happening on our campus? And that's a great question, because even if you have residence halls and something happens off campus, if a student reports a sexual assault, for example, that occurred off campus in a campus area that in somewhere that's not countable under Clery, we'll say, or in this case, what we're going to assume is if you have an incident of dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking that's reported by one of your students, there are measures you need to place. So the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights affording those rights to the students. So if it is another student who is the alleged perpetrator in the reported assault, you still have to make sure to have those options in place to help to notify law enforcement, to have procedures in place, to have the option for a disciplinary piece. And Abby, I don't know if you have anything to add to this because we do get that question a lot.
Yeah, and I think I was just going to say, I think that is a common question. So recognizing that the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights and the rights that we afford to survivors are not limited to Clery geography, even though a lot of times people think of the Clery Act in terms of geography, recognize that this is something that extends beyond what you're reporting within your statistics.
And I think it's important. I think that, when we got that question, it was, there's a reluctance to ask questions. And really, you need to ask questions about these things because it can get complicated. And there are a lot of laws that overlap. So really do not hesitate. It's something that we do as a TA provider for the campus program. And then even outside of that realm, just as a national organization, we are really set up to help with these challenges and help connect with maybe other institutions or like institutions who are doing something well. Another question was, our CSAs are related to Clery reporting only, correct? And it is correct that a campus security authority is specific only to Clery. However, you also want to still consider responsible employees. So under Title IX, there are responsible employees as well.
Okay. And we just wanted to go through, particularly as institutions are looking at some of the new requirements within the Violence Against Women Act in relation to college and university campuses. We wanted to just take some time to go through some of the common mistakes in Clery Act implementation, because what we've seen for a lot of campuses is that they're using this as an opportunity not to just incorporate some of the new requirements, but to really take a comprehensive look at what the institution is providing already and figuring out if there are any gaps that need to be addressed. So we're just going to take some time to go through some of the challenges with Clery Act implementation, because a lot of times that can apply to, and it likely will apply to, how you implement some of the changes within Campus Safe. So the first one is failure to report crimes based on proper geography. And it's timely given that last question. We know that there are specific requirements under Clery when it comes to geography as to what information is included within your statistics. We have on-campus buildings and property, what's known as non-campus buildings and property, public property, and then of course the reporting for what occurs within campus residence halls. So some of the challenges, some of the common compliance challenges that we see in relation to non-campus building and property is institutions that often fail to report crimes in these additional locations. So for non-campuses, or for non-campus building and property, it's that building or property that's owned or controlled by the institution, but it's not on campus, but it's used for educational purposes. So it's really critical that institutions are really reviewing the buildings that the institution owns or controls and are used to directly support university programs, to recognize if there are buildings that would fall under that non-campus building and property category, and to make sure that you are certainly reporting the crimes, the Clery crimes that fall within that particular geographic area. One of the concerns that we've seen with public property is both over or underreporting. So with underreporting, it can be failure to identify what the institution's public property requirements are. But with overreporting, what we see is that some colleges or universities will identify private buildings that are being used as the public and will list that as public property. So if it's a private building, it wouldn't fall within that public property requirement. And then the other one is for separate campuses. So institutions often fail to report for separate or branch campuses. So recognizing that if they do have a separate campus, they have that obligation under Clery to comply independently. So they would have their own annual security report. So institutions really should be asking, do we have, do we have geography that would fall under a separate campus? It has that distinct administrative unit, it has budgetary and hiring authority, it's an organized program of study. So something to take into consideration as you look at your own geography. Another one is lack of or inadequate policy statements. So the first thing that I would point out with that is that if you have a policy statement there also needs to be a policy. And that sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but that's one place where in Clery program reviews by the Department of Education, there have been gaps at some colleges and universities where they'll have a policy statement within the annual security report, but they won't actually have a policy to back that up. So either it's missing, or there have also been situations where the policy and policy statement doesn't accurately describe that institution's actual practices. So making sure that no matter what, your policies and your policy statements really speak to the actual procedures on your campus. With timely warnings and emergency notification, making sure that you do have separate policies for each. For reporting crimes, making sure that you have information within your annual security report as to whom crimes should be reported, and also information about voluntary confidential reporting on your campus. With sexual assault policies, we frequently see that the policy in place and the policy statement in place might be missing some of the elements. So I know that earlier in the webinar, Allison was going through the different elements within the sex offense policy statement and what we know is the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights. So making sure, for example, that there's information in there about the changing academic or living situation, about sanctions that the institution may impose or procedures for campus disciplinary action. So not only just having a policy, but making sure that it hits all the different requirements. And that's something that will certainly be critical as you look at the new requirements with VAWA and with Campus Save, to make sure that not only do you have these policies in place, but do they have all of the different pieces that are required. For crime prevention and awareness programs, making sure that you have information about the programs and a description of what that means. So you're not just listing the title of the program, that it really gives an understanding of what is offered on the campus, the type and the frequency of these programs. And also relationship with local law enforcement. So whether or not your institution has MOUs in place with that local law enforcement or with local law enforcement. Another one is failure to publish and distribute the annual security report as a comprehensive document. So making sure that that annual security report, even if your institution has elements of the ASR in other locations, you want to make sure that you have an annual security report that has all of the different pieces. So it has all of the required policy statements, it has the statistics, and that is a complete document. It's not separated or separate in different locations. And the annual fire safety report might be included, or it might be separate depending on what your institution chooses to do. But if it is separate, there should be information on how to access the alternate report. And there's that October 1st deadline. So no matter what, the college or university has to have the annual security report available by October 1st of each year. If online, making sure that not only is that report available by October 1st, but if it's online, that individuals are receiving information, a notice of availability of the report with the exact URL, a description of its contents, and a notice that a paper copy will be available upon request. And then lastly, inadequate systems for collecting statistics. And I think this is one that unfortunately we've seen a lot of colleges and universities have some challenges with. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you're looking at in particular is campus security authorities. Have we identified who is a campus security authority under the Clery Act? And also, how are we providing them with information as to their roles? What kind of training do we have? Do we send them emails notifying them of their role? Do we have documentation and procedures for collecting reportable incidents? When it comes to collecting from local police, documenting your good faith effort. So many colleges and universities are fortunate in that they have a good working relationship with local police. They're able to provide them with specific information about what they need for the ASR, and they're able to get those statistics. But say, for example, you're in an area where that relationship has been more challenging and you make the request for the information, but for whatever reason, they're not sharing that information with you. You want to make sure that you're documenting that proof of request, how you've reached out to them, what that's looked like, how you've provided them with information about what information you need, So then if, for example, there would be a program review, you really have that documentation to say, look, we've made this good faith effort, we've had this request. Unfortunately, they haven't shared the information with us, but we've done everything that we could to get that info. And then lastly, incident reports. Individuals who are writing incident reports need to have training on the Clery Act so they recognize what information needs to be included for reporting. So having an understanding of what geography or what information you would need to know relevant to geography, recognizing that when a report is made, there are other requirements under Clery that might come into play as to whether or not a timely warning or emergency notification would need to be done. So it's really the training piece is critically important so that no matter what, you're able to get some of this coordination and collaboration on campus. And here's just a slide that's to hopefully help give you a reminder of who's considered a campus security authority, because again, identifying who those CSAs are and providing them with information and training, procedures for collecting the incidents, whether or not you have reporting forms, all of these things will really help to ensure that you have coordination on your campus and that you are receiving these reports when they do come in. And really all of the reasons that I just went over, some of the challenges that we've seen at colleges and universities, are really the reason why it is critical to have collaboration. Clery compliance in particular, and that extends to the new requirements under VAWA with Campus Save, cannot just be the role of a lone soldier on campus. It requires a lot of collaboration because we know that reports are going to come in from all of the different people that you see on this screen in front of you. We know that reports are not just made to campus police or security, and that's one of the reasons why there are requirements with campus security authorities, because we know that a lot of times survivors might not automatically go to campus police or security. They might go to their RA, they might go to their coach, they're going to go to somebody that they trust, that they feel comfortable with, that's able to help them. So you want to make sure that when those reports do come in, that those people are empowered and do know how to help them and how to respond. And here's just a summary of some of the compliance challenges that we talked about. But as I mentioned, I think right now, particularly with the changes to VAWA, is really a good time to be working towards that collaborative effort. If it's not happening already, here's a really good excuse to say, look, all of these requirements are coming in. This is something that we need to take a look at, and here's where we need to sit down together and figure out what are all of our rules, what are all of our responsibilities in order to make this work.
And we really like this quote. We do quite a bit of work with our U.S. Attorney's Office, and Zane Meminger, who's our U.S. Attorney, talked about the Clery Act's legacy as it's been advanced, and basically it went from addressing campus violence. They're now more focused. Now colleges and universities are focused on solving problems more than admitting one existed. I think that our founders could tell you when the law was passed, they hit a lot of brick walls in terms of campuses saying we do not have a problem, and this is 25 years ago. And now I think we're all in the same boat in terms of how can we address this? How collectively, with the different laws that intersect, how can we create a holistic approach? And that's really how we approach this webinar, and how Abby and I approach a lot of the trainings that we do. Is there's certainly the letter of the law, and again, some of the questions that we got, and I've been responding individually to some of the folks, and we'll go through some of them right now. But there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. So looking at how we can, as campuses, develop a team. If you're the one person on this webinar and the only person who's responsible for Clery, it's not enough. You really need to build these teams. And I know that's one thing that with OVW, the campus program grants help to do, is to create these teams that you can have on your campus that can respond not only to Clery, but also to Title IX concerns and the other concerns that come up with campus safety. Some of the questions we got for the 3 categories that we talked about: the report that needs to be made when you're offering the option to notify law enforcement, does it have to be local law enforcement or your campus? And it should be both. So there should be a slew of options. I mean, just thinking as you develop these policies and procedures, options, options, options. So making sure that you're providing someone who is reporting a crime with multiple options. The other question that we have is specific to the primary prevention requirement. And the question is about whether it has to be mandatory prevention, how often it has to occur. And these are pieces that will happen, that will come out during that negotiated rulemaking process as well. The next questions is about campus security authorities, and are they only related to Clery? And campus security authorities, and we talked about this a little bit, is a Clery specific term, but you do want to think about Title IX and your responsible employees under Title IX, how those two definitions intersect. And keeping in mind that many people who are CSAs are also going to be responsible employees. So I just needed to highlight that since we got that question before.
And I just want to jump in with some of the other questions that I'm seeing as well. One of them was that this was just related to the webinar itself, whether or not a copy of the PowerPoint will be shared. I know that Amy, who started this webinar, she sent out the PowerPoint this morning. If for some reason you did not receive it, please contact us. Our emails are going to be included at the very end of the webinar, and we can absolutely make sure that you have that information. The other question that I saw is, can you clarify that if there's ongoing abuse, how many incidents do you report of dating violence? And I think that that's a question that we've been receiving pretty commonly, not just in relation to dating and domestic violence, but also with stalking, because we know that it's a course of conduct crime, even just there within the definition. So that's going to be something where the negotiated rulemaking and the final regulations are really going to give us some clarity as to that counting piece and what that looks like.
One of the other questions that we got is collecting the statistics. Can we use local police department web crime report statistics in place of requesting specific crime statistics? You do want to make that request, and I know that sometimes you may not get a response from your local law enforcement, or you may get you may get something. If you don't get a response, making the request is simply compliant with the law. Now, what they may do is tell you to go to their web reporting system, and that's fine, and then you can use them. But I would say certainly make sure you have that documentation, whether it be an email or a written letter asking for that information.
We had another question as to whether or not we have a suggestion for a sample campus policy that would meet compliance. I think one thing that we always caution is about looking for policy in a box, because every college or university is so different. Now, as I mentioned, the Stalking Resource Center has a model campus stalking policy. So there are places out there where you can look for some guidance as you're trying to see how it's going to fit your institution. But I would certainly make sure that you're also considering whether or not what you're seeing and what you're reading really makes sense with your own campus climate and with your own campus size and the other considerations that would need to be made. We've had conversations with the Department of Education where they've mentioned going in for a program review, and they look at a policy, and in the middle of the policy they see the name of another institution. So it's not just something that we can easily pull from someone else, even though I think you can certainly learn from other colleges and universities. It's still something that you want to make sure really does fit your own climate.
The next question is about online, and it's about having campus and online students. So do we have to provide training and services for both types of students? And this has been a popular question since the VAWA amendments came through. And to be honest with you, I think that will be a topic in negotiated rulemaking specific to cyber stalking, the crime of cyber stalking, and if that will fall into the stalking definitions, and how to, and many campuses that are bricks and mortar but then also have developed online programs, what their reaction would be. So I hate to say to be determined, and I know that's a lot of what we're saying for this, and that's really one of the reasons that we made this webinar available. We partnered with OVW to get the information out here, to get the conversation going, because some of this is up in the air. So I really think in some of these areas you don't want to jump to conclusions yet, and we also don't want to provide you with guidance without knowing what those conclusions will be. So if you're getting questions like that on your campus of how you're going to approach online students, you certainly can say we need to wait to see what the legislation says. That being said, individually, can you have systems in place for those online students if they're being victimized? Yes, and you should, just as, again, the spirit and the morality of it. So simply having And it may just be a page of resources that's on their dashboard or on the Blackboard, whatever their online login portal is. I think it's always beneficial to have that, to maybe have some national hotlines, to maybe have some resources, just so you have that information. And while you may not know if it's going to be counted, you certainly can have programs. And I think it's a good step to have something in place if a student online is going through some type of experience or some type of victimization, because they are still in fact your students.
We also had a question as to whether or not the recording of this webinar will be available. We absolutely will share it with all of you after it is ready, and then we'll also have it available on our website in case there is anyone else that couldn't attend that's interested in watching, or if you want to watch us collaboratively with some other folks on your campus, you'll be able to have the opportunity to do that.
And we have a great question about in regards to the Clery reporting of VAWA. While I understand the next year's reporting has to collect and report, has to revisit 2010 to 2012. And that is correct. It's the first time the Department of Education is asking you to retroactively look back and count these things, these pieces. So that being said, I would surmise, and actually in talking to some of the folks at Department of Education, that's the reason for the term good faith effort. In terms of enforcement, I don't think that, from my perception and from my conversations, and Abby can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm saying this on a recorded webinar, so I truly believe the intention is to make this good faith effort. So you start to think about putting these procedures in place. I do not think that the Department of Education's intention is to go around and fine folks for crimes that they're collecting in 2011. I think it's just a matter to get you thinking about your protocol, and that's why they use that term in their letter. And Abby, I don't know if you have anything further to add.
And I would say that's the starting point that we're seeing for most colleges and universities, is they're even asking the question, well, what have we done up until this point if reports are made? Because we know that unfortunately crimes of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking are not new and are not new to your institutions. So chances are you've had people coming forward looking for support, looking for a campus process that will support them as they make a report, as they look to connect with advocates and other resources. So I would imagine that I hope that you already have some process in place for how you respond and how you record this information. So the starting point question is, how have we handled cases up until this point? How have we recorded this information up until this point? And do we have a system moving forward?
And this is our wrap up in terms of where do we go from here. So what do you, and we know that from the Dear Colleague letter in 2011 from OCR, specific to sexual violence, that many campuses and many of you have probably spent quite a bit of time in terms of revisiting policies, revisiting protocols. So I think one of the things that we've been advising folks to do is evaluate your compliance. Step back and look at your annual security report. Sit down with a team and look at your protocols that are in place, or take a case study and see what things you are doing. And we've worked with some campuses where we've sat and we've looked at their ASRs with them. We've gone through the pieces, and we've seen maybe what's missing. And that goes right hand in hand with build a team. It's an opportunity to build a team. If you're someone who's working solely on this, or maybe one or two folks, or simply public safety, we find a lot that Clery falls solely on public safety. You can't be successful if that's how it is. So find a team. Here's an opportunity for you to reach out to your campus and to build a team of experts, quote unquote, in certain areas. So whoever's handling prevention or health promotion, bring them in on your team. Bring someone in from public safety, someone in from student health, maybe someone from an academic department if it's applicable, from sociology or criminal justice or higher education administration. It's really a team to bring time to bring people together, and then coordinate your efforts, because there may be things. I think it brings a tear to my eye, unfortunately, is the best way to describe it, when I go to a campus and see that their Title IX efforts and Clery efforts are completely siloed and separate. And that shouldn't be the case. There should not be that friction. Those two efforts should be coordinated, because they do overlap, like it or not. Learning from colleagues. I think that one of my favorite things about higher education is that there's a lot of sharing that goes on. So learn from your colleagues in terms of what they're doing. We have a private chat board through our website with our, we have a Clery collaboration program, where campuses are working with teams of 5 or 7 people to truly institutionalize compliance. because if you get people thinking about, and to be honest with you, it almost mirrors what the primary prevention and the education piece is aiming for, that a one-shot deal doesn't work. We want to educate our students throughout the year. Well, the same thing goes with us as adult learners, is we want to be educated about this throughout the year. We should be working on this throughout the year and in groups to really make sense of everything that is put before us. And then again, as we mentioned, put steps in place before rulemaking. It's certainly overwhelming when Clery amendments are passed, even for us as we train on them. I think Abby and I have toured the country with similar presentations to this. But a lot of what was in the VAWA amendments to Clery makes sense. It makes sense to do for your students, and a lot of you are probably doing it. Think back or go through your crime log and see you've probably, unfortunately, had reports of dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking. How have you responded? Do you have some type of protocol that's in place? It may not be in your annual security report, but can you connect it to that? If you have a women's center or a sexual assault service center or an advocacy center on your campus, they may have these types of protocols in place. So really step back and see what's in place before rulemaking. And then, as I heard Abby mention earlier, both Abby and I come, again, from the community background, the community side, the county level. We both worked in Pennsylvania on the county level in victim services. And I know she did work directly with the universities in her area, as did I. And it's really important to reach out to those folks because they are there to help, and they're a good outside voice and an outside expert in this area. They may also help if you don't have the capacity to provide services or crisis response to victims who report. They may have the capacity to help you with that process.
And I just want to add, because we're getting a lot of really wonderful questions, and these are the moments where I want to jump up and down in my chair because some of the questions are so fabulous, particularly in relation to the education done on campus. And the comment from someone was that we need a sustained year-long, year-round, 24/7, 365 days a year effort, not just during National Campus Safety Awareness Month. And that's absolutely true. And that's certainly part of the new regulations, is how are we doing education on our or within our campus communities, not just once and done, but how are we making sure that the education that we do has impact? And part of that is evaluating not just compliance, but evaluating whether or not the types of programs that you're doing is working. We also had some questions about, we had a slide a little bit earlier that just listed a number of different programs that we've seen as we go and we do trainings throughout the country. So one of the questions was, what is the Campus Men of Strength Club? And that is actually an initiative through Men Can Stop Rape, who are also technical assistance providers with the Office on Violence Against Women TA campus program. So I would really encourage you to really take a look, not just at the resources that we've mentioned today, but use the internet as your friend. Use the information that's available online that other colleges and universities post and share to really look and investigate what's out there and what makes sense for your particular campus.
Another program that I would mention too, since we're talking about fellow TA providers, is Green Dot. So we've gotten a lot of questions about primary prevention and bystander intervention and what type of programs exist. And we don't, and there's a lot of for-profits out there that I know have options, and there are so many things that are available to you. So I think asking one another is worthwhile. And sometimes we are asked by folks, but we can't formally endorse anyone as a nonprofit. But I can tell you our other fellow nonprofit organization that is also a TA provider, Green Dot, has a really great website about some of the foundations for bystander intervention and the research for primary prevention. So I certainly would say to look out to them. And I imagine, I know that OVW is going to do a series of webinars, both for grantees and non-grantees. And they've been committed to this educational and this affordable educational resource for the higher education community. So I would say to continue to keep an eye out. I know it's something we're going to advertise and that they will for other programs, because although this one is on the VAWA amendments to Clery, there will be other programs specific to this area. And I imagine that primary prevention will be one of the up and coming ones.
And there was a question as to what is the Green Dot program's website address. I believe it's www.greendot.org. If not, I know that I've used Google and have found them very easily before. So if I apologize if I'm giving you the wrong address, but they're definitely readily out there and easily available.
And this is a great question, and I am jumping in, Abby, because I think it's a common question. If there is a conflict between Clery and Title IX, which act takes priority? And I've heard campuses saying, well, we're just going to pick one and comply. And what that inevitably means is you won't be in compliance with one or the other, which is not a good thing. Does Clery have an evidence standard for hearings like preponderance of the evidence in Title IX? Clery does not. The VAWA amendments to Clery codify some of what's in Title IX, but there's no evidentiary standard in the bill that was passed. So I suspect during negotiated rulemaking, as we're talking about that, a lot of my inclination is that a lot of what comes out in the rules is going to really mirror Title IX, as it should, quite honestly. So the preponderance standard is the one that is put forth by Title IX and the only one that you do have. But if you do believe that you see a conflict between the two, we're happy to talk further through that with you further. We've done quite a bit of presentations. We are experts specifically in Clery, but we've done quite a bit of presentations with our partners at Victims' Rights Law Center in Boston, who primarily handle Title IX. So we talk a lot about the intersection between the two. So if there's something specific you're looking for, don't hesitate to reach out. We can certainly connect you, and I know they feel the same way about it. They do direct TA nationally as well. But we want to make sure that you have the information and that you don't choose one or the other. If you're in that type of situation, then that's really a reason to step back and get some of the summaries and look at some of these pieces. Abby, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, but we're getting a number of really good questions, and I apologize if there are any questions that we do miss, just because there are a lot of questions coming in at once. We'll certainly, we're always happy to follow up via email, and we can compile a list of these questions as well. Thank you for clarifying. Someone mentioned that they believe that the Green Dot website is www.livethegreen.com. So that's what you can use to access them. And another one is, are there any online forums for campus law enforcement to share Clery program successes and failures? And that's a really great question. I know that Allison talked a bit about what we have within our collaborative pilot program on our website. Allison, I don't know if you're aware of any forums in which people are sharing that kind of information, but I think it's certainly useful to have institutions do that.
I think there are some smaller forums. I know that there's a general listserv in IACLEA, International Association of Campus Law Enforcement, where that information is shared. And the correction, livethegreendot.com, that just came through from the person who shared that website. I don't know if we said .org earlier, so that's great.
And we're just giving it some extra time in case there are any final questions. Again, thank you for all of the questions that you have shared thus far. It's been a really great discussion.
And we have on our next slide, there's contact information for both Abby and me. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Something that we do quite a bit of assistance. And again, for campus program grantees, that's obviously why we work with OVW here, but we also, for outside of that, so if you do not have one of the campus grants, we still can help answer questions or direct you to some resources if that's what you're looking for. And the questions were wonderful. I think we had some really great questions throughout this process, and what we're hoping to do is maybe put that into a document, FAQ, about the VAWA amendments to Clery or Campus Save, and develop something like that. I don't know if it will be in time for when we send this out to you, because Amy's pretty good about sending it out a couple hours after the webinar ends. But if that is something we create, we'll make sure to get that out to you. And I think it looks like, are you getting any more questions on your end, Abby and Amy?
I'm not seeing any more coming in.
So we're really happy to partner again with OVW and the campus program on this webinar. I think it was the first of what will be a series of many, again, for grantees and non-grantees. So it's a great resource, especially as we know travel budgets are limited. We welcome any feedback that you have. We also keep up with our Facebook and Twitter, so that's our plug there. If you want to follow us in those two areas, we make sure to keep posted on any events going on or any research that's out there.
And we'll be sending out an evaluation with the information as to how you can access the recording. So we really encourage you to share information about what you'd like more of, what you found to be beneficial, where you would like more information, so that hopefully we can provide similar webinars that are useful to you in the future.
And as I mentioned, the Clery Center will have a seat at the table at the negotiated rulemaking. So really reaching out to Abby and I, if there's questions you have or anything that comes up, I know that most of the information that we'll go to the table with are things that we've just learned from being out in the field, talking to people at conferences, at our Clery conferences, at events. And so really it's a matter of our goal is really twofold: to make the process obviously serve students and victims of crime first, but also to make the process make sense for campuses, so they're not bogged down in the administrative pieces, but they actually can provide services to their students, and that there are tools for that.
And Abby and Allie, I did get one additional question privately. Someone had asked, can one policy address sexual assault as well as domestic dating violence and stalking?
It can. In terms of how you want to structure your policy, that is up to you. And I believe that from SAVE, and Abby can correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the rights for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking are going to mirror the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights. So if you want to revisit that or duplicate that, I think that would be a good start and a good faith effort to that end.
Absolutely, and some of them were expanded as well. Like, for example, we know that there were already rights afforded related to academic or change of academic and living situation. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, that was expanded to transportation and working. So we did see some changes there, but just last month, we had a Proceeding in Partnership conference in San Antonio, and someone from University of Michigan, Pam Heatley, who's been doing a lot of work with Title IX, that was one point that she really made in relation to how that institution was looking at the new changes and implementing them on their campus. Is they were really looking at, do we have a structure for adjudicating these cases and for doing it well? So a lot of people have done some really careful, or have really carefully looked at their policies in relation to sex offenses. So making sure that you're taking the same kind of care in how you look at your policies related to domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking, and making sure that you have a practice and that you have a structure in place for responding to these crimes.
Well, I think with that, we will thank everyone for joining us today and for the fabulous questions. Abby and Amy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think other than what we said in that. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Nothing on this end.
I was just going to say, other than what we said in that, we really would like it to be an ongoing conversation. So please feel free to send us an email with any questions or comments that you might have, and to give us a phone call or send us an email if you need any support.
And also, we want to provide you with the best possible amount of information regarding the questions that have been asked. So as we compile that, just be patient. We'll try to get that follow-up email out as soon as possible, but we do want it to have the most information possible for you guys.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great afternoon.